Joseph Allison, a sales representative for Westinghouse Electric Company, had this story to tell. There was a man in my territory that our company was most eager to sell to. My predecessor had called on him for 10 years without selling anything. When I took over the territory, I called steadily for 3 years without getting an order. Finally, after 13 years of calls and sales talk, we sold him a few motors. If these proved to be all right, an order for several hundred more would follow. Such was my expectation. Right? I knew they'd be all right. So when I called 3 weeks later, I was in high spirits. The chief engineer greeted me with this shocking announcement. "Allison, I can't buy the remainder of the motors from you." "Why?" I asked in amazement. "Why?" "Because your motors are too hot. I can't put my hand on them." I knew it wouldn't do any good to argue. I'd tried that sort of thing too long. So I thought of getting the yes, yes response. "Well, now look, Mr. Smith," I said. "I agree with you 100%. If those motors are running too hot, you ought not to buy any more of them. You must have motors that won't run any hotter than standards set by the National Electrical Manufacturers Association. Isn't that so?" He agreed it was. I'd gotten my first yes. The Electrical Manufacturers Association regulations say that a properly designed motor may have a temperature of 72 degrees Fahrenheit above room temperature. Is that correct? "Yes," he agreed, "that's quite correct. But your motors are much hotter." I didn't argue with him. I merely asked, "How hot is the mill room?" "Oh," he said, "about 75 degrees Fahrenheit." "Well," I replied, "if the mill room is 75 degrees, and you add 72 to that, that makes a total of 147 degrees Fahrenheit. Wouldn't you scald your hand if you held it under a spigot of hot water at a temperature of 147 degrees Fahrenheit? Again, he had to say yes. "Well," I suggested, "wouldn't it be a good idea to keep your hands off those motors?" "Oh, well, I guess you're right," he admitted. We continued to chat for a while. Then he called his secretary and lined up approximately $35,000 worth of business for the ensuing month. It took me years and cost me countless thousands of dollars in lost business before I finally learned that it doesn't pay to argue, that it is much more profitable and much more interesting to look at things from the other person's viewpoint and to try to get that person saying yes, yes.